What's up, everybody? Okay, so this is Christian Chocolates here, and I am here to talk about the tendency for the rate of profit to fall. And I'm going to talk about this because it's something that I've been interested in lately due to everybody's talking about wages and productivity and economic shit. And this is actually one of the most important Marxist concepts there is. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to explain it. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. And while I explain it, I'm going to be cleaning up my disgusting apartment. It is a couple days before Christmas, and I haven't had much time to clean. So I'm going to be doing that. Okay, so the thing about the tendency for the rate of profit to fall is that it's based on some other Marxian economic concepts that you kind of have to have a little bit of a grasp of. The first and most important is obviously the labor theory of value, which is the theory around all Marxian economics is based. And there's a few things you need to understand about the labor theory of value. Most importantly, value is not the same thing as price. That's a big mistake that a lot of people make when they try to criticize Marxism. They'll say, oh, well, just because somebody worked more on it doesn't mean it costs more, blah, blah, blah. Value is actually a social concept, not an economic. Well, I shouldn't say that, but value is a social concept, and it's based on the total productivity of any given society. So if you think about a very small, basic, I'm going to put the phone down for a second. Think about a small, basic society of cave people, right? They have no advanced technology, just a little tribe of cave people. One of them has a rare rock that makes a really good hammer, okay? And the other one wants that rock, so he offers to trade a stick for it. The first caveman, the one who owns the rock, says, what do I need a stick for? I can go into the woods and get a stick anytime I want. So the second caveman, because he's smart, says, you know what? A stick is just a stick. You can find it anywhere. So what he does is he sharpens the stick into a little spear, and suddenly the spear has value. It's not just something any old asshole can go up and grab. So he trades the spear for the rock, and everybody's happy. So the difference between that stick and the spear is that one of them has value. And what created that value? The labor that the caveman performed on it by sharpening it into a spear. Pretty basic. And you can apply this to any commodity, any service. Basically, how it works on a macro scale is every society has a finite amount of labor. There's only so many people who are able to work, and there's only so many hours in the day. So everything that we've created, all this shit that you can see in my dirty apartment, my video games, my clothes, the bed, the computer, the Christmas tree, all that stuff is a product of labor. Without people working on it, it would just be raw materials sitting in the woods waiting for someone to come pick it up. Okay, so the second thing you have to understand is the profit in a Marxian sense. Profit comes from, in capitalism, profit comes from exploitation of the working class. So what happens is a commodity is the result of labor plus means of production. Means of production is tools and raw materials, basically. So what happens is a capitalist owns the means of production, and he owns capital, which is money that is used to create more money. What he does is he puts his means of production forward, and he purchases labor from a worker who owns no means of production in order to work the means of production into a commodity. The laborer adds value to those means of production and shapes them into a commodity, right? So the value of a commodity, all value comes from labor, but the value of a commodity comes from the sum of the value of the labor enacted upon it and the production process, plus the value of the means of production that were used during that process. So if you take like a coat, okay, the coat's value is the value of the leather and the buttons and the seams and the needles and all the stuff that you use to create it. All that brings its own labor together, and then the worker who makes the coat adds their own labor. Here's where profit comes in. The capitalist already owns the means of production to make that coat. He already owns the leather, owns the buttons, all that stuff. He owns the workhouse in which the coat is made. So the capitalist already has that stuff. He has to spend his capital on acquiring that. And then, in order to actually make a profit, what he has to do is he has to hire the laborer and provide the laborer with that means of production. Now what happens is the worker is adding value to those materials to make a finished coat. The capitalist then pays the worker back in a wage. But here's the kicker. The wage that the capitalist pays to the worker has to be less than the value the worker created in making the product. Because that's where the profit comes from, because he's already spent the money on the means of production. He can't profit just off of means of production. He profits from the difference between the total value created by the worker and the wage paid back to the worker. And this composition between value added from labor and value added from means of production is called the organic composition of capital. And a way to think about this is living labor as opposed to dead labor. So dead labor is embedded in the means of production. Dead labor is what the means of production pass on to the finished commodity. Living labor is what the worker passes on to the commodity in the through the production process. Okay, so and there's also, I guess, a concept that you have to understand is something called socially necessary labor time, and that's why you'll hear people say, well, a commodity isn't more valuable because somebody spent more time making it. Socially necessary labor time is basically the amount of labor that an average worker in average conditions spends on the production process. So it doesn't mean if I take 3 hours to make a coat and Bob takes 6 hours, Bob's coat is not worth twice as much as me. If we're the only people in the world making coats, then the coat is worth an average of between us. So, okay. So, the reason that I'm interested in this and explaining this is because people have lately been discussing, I've seen it on Twitter, and I've seen economics journals talking about it, and they always have this kind of frustrated tone, and part of it's probably clickbait, but they say things like, why isn't productivity's going up, but wages aren't. Workers are more productive than ever, but they're not making enough money. Why is this happening? Nobody can explain it. Economics doesn't explain it. What's going on? Well, oh, my fiance is here. Hang on one second. Hey, Sarah. I'm doing a YouTube video where I'm explaining the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. Say hi to YouTube.
Hi, YouTube.
I'm cleaning and explaining the tendency. Okay, so let me finish this and then we'll do stuff. Okay, so the actual answer is that, yes, of course, there is somebody who can explain it. It's not that hard. And that person's name was Karl Marx. So when productivity rises, it's usually as a result of new technology. Think of the cotton gin, right? The cotton gin made it much more productive to spin cotton. Okay. Think of any new technology that makes the production process much faster. Now, you might think that... Sorry, I'm doing the laundry. You might think that... oh, if you have new technology, then that's great. That means more profit. You're being more productive. You're producing more goods. The truth is that while obviously new technology and more productivity can increase profits, what it tends to decrease is the rate of profit. And that's an important distinction. Right, Sarah? Sarah's tired. She just got off a long day at work. So the basic way to understand this is increasing productivity raises the organic composition of capital. It changes the ratio of dead labor to living labor that we were talking about. So if it takes a worker less time to make a coat, it doesn't change the value of the coat. But what happens is, because of this new technology, more of the value of the coat comes from dead labor. It comes from the more advanced means of production. The problem with this is that profit comes from living labor, right? It's workers doing work that creates new value, and profit has to come from new value. You can't just profit off means of production. You need people to work them. So what happens is, over the long term, as productivity rises, and, as productivity rises, workers are more productive, the rate of profit tends to fall. Now, this is a long-term trend. It doesn't mean that it happens right away. There are things that can counteract that in the short term. However, in the long term, the organic composition of capital rises for every industry at different rates, and the rate of profit tends to fall. Marx in Capital has some, mathematics that you can read to illustrate it. He has a mathematical example. But so basically what happens is, the more technology goes up, the harder it is to turn a profit. You have to sell more and more and more because you're making less of a profit on each sale. And what this means is that capitalists, in order to maintain their profit and growth, they have to do things like ship production overseas where they can cut labor. Because if your rate of profit is falling and you want to keep profit up, you have to lower the money you spend on wages. If you lower the money you spend on wages, then the money, the value of your profit goes up. So they do things like ship jobs to China. They do things like attack unions so that workers can't collectively bargain. They refuse to raise the minimum wage in decades. Things like that. And all of this is as a result of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. It's going to continue falling as long as technology keeps driving productivity up. You can't maintain capitalism in the 21st century. Capitalism will fail because of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, and that's why it's one of the most important Marxist concepts. There's the welfare state's not coming back. Stronger unions aren't going to fix this because you can't maintain a capitalist profit-driven system when the rate of profit is constantly over the long term falling to near zero. And I will put a link in the description to an economist who has used some numbers and used data from Thomas Piketty to actually confirm that the rate of profit has been falling for most industries since the 19th century. So, hope this was helpful. Thanks for sticking around. See you next time.